It's showing me doing something that I'm not doing.
It's going to be a little bit delayed on,
It's a little laggy.
on that one up there.
Yeah.
There's always like a 5 to 10 second delay between what you see
I've never been on the internet before, so.
live in YouTube versus down
Hello.
here. Like I could switch it right now. Different camera. It looked like it switched right there, but that was the switch I did like 10 seconds ago.
Totally. Cool.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, I just won't look at myself.
This is why this is kind of like a growing process in terms of understanding how to stream, getting all of this stuff set up right. Cool. Thanks everybody for joining us. Hey Wambra, thanks for hopping in here. I love that emoji. Like waving with the 8 balls for
Like the
eyes.
8 balls eyes?
It's really like
Yeah, it's like a tadpole.
kind of scary.
Yeah.
All right, so here we are. We have our good friend Eli in the house.
Hello.
We'll give him a proper introduction. I'm Joe,
I'm Victor.
and this is the Mod City Live stream. And we've got Eli from Mystic Circuits in here, the one and only, the iconoclast. I don't know. Is that
Sure.
It seems appropriate.
Yeah.
You have
I have iconoplasty.
you have such a very unique way about you, and your modules are such a unique and different take on module design that we had to have you in the studio.
Oh, I'm blushing.
And
You can't tell from the camera, but
yeah, the light's kind of weird, but we got you. I think you know.
thanks for having me on.
Let's talk a little bit about Mystic Circuits for a minute here.
Sure. What you want to know?
What is the deal with Mystic Circuits?
Well, that's such such a big question.
When did you get
Really,
started?
like, feed me something to work with.
Well, let's start from the beginning. What was Mystic Circuits was not the original name of your
No,
project, right? What was the original project?
My original name for the company was Circuit Shaman. And then, my dad being a much more savvy business person than I was like, hey, you should try to copyright that. And then it turned out that there was a conflict with another copyright. And it took a while to kind of come up with a new name. Frankly, Circuit Shaman is kind of, for lack of a better word, a douchey name, especially in California where there's a lot of like self-described shaman types. Like, I didn't have that thought when I first came up with it. It was more, I was reading a lot of like I think his name was like Philip Carroll and like chaos magic stuff, and I was like, oh, like return to shamanism, blah blah blah. But now now I realize that it's not a good name. So it took me like 2 or 3 months to come up with a new name. The entire time I have basically like ready to, my first full module like ready to go, but I can't print any panels or anything like that until I have a name. So Derek, who goes by Basic, actually came up with the Mystic Circuits name after we tried like every other like weird semi-occult like spiritual combination of words or like stuff having to do with purple or just like weird stuff. Yeah, we thought of everything, and it was either you think about it for more than 5 minutes and it was a bad name, or it was already taken. So Mystic somehow was not taken. I think there is another company that goes by Mystic, but they're like a guitar company from Mystic, Connecticut, I want to say. So it's not like a ton of overlap, and I obviously have no interest in bothering them about the name. But
how awesome!
Yeah, I finally have a name that I could copyright and never have to think about this again, and I like the name. It feels a lot more in tune with what I'm the sort of like, I don't know, like hippie spiritual element of synthesis that I'm interested in, rather than like shaman, which it has such weird connotations. So yeah,
I have to ask.
What's up?
Are you a wook?
No. Well, I showered today, so I guess the answer is no.
see, that came up already,
Yeah.
all on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, I am not a wook. I'm not a wook.
Well established. Let's get that down early.
Yes.
So you're the opposite polarity. Our other person was, I am a wook. So,
Uh,
But he
yeah,
was-
right. That's
but-
not like my.
But then he explained how complicated it was, and I'd have to say he was pretty showered up. So
Who?
our friend.
Oh.
And Conti, we had on the studio, yeah, or we had on the show a couple weeks ago.
I mean, no, nothing against wooks. It's just not my my lifestyle. I hope everyone at home is like, what the hell are they talking about right now?
Oh, if you're wondering what a
Electrical
wook
circuit,
is,
yeah.
we wondered as well, and
Yeah.
we asked Encanti a couple weeks ago when he brought it up. So,
So this is new knowledge for you.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
But it's useful knowledge.
Yes.
So it's you have to stay high on the trends when we're
Or if
getting
you're a
older.
wook, you just have to stay high.
That too, right? Yeah. Never mind the trends.
Yeah.
That's a great tale about the beginning of Mystic Circuits. So
It was very painful at the time, but I'm very glad that I did that and took my dad's advice and didn't just like run with a name that could have possibly, like once you've already established a company, it's way harder to change your name.
Absolutely,
Right.
and that's a lesson not just to the the corporate minded, but or the the business minded, but it's also for music acts.
Yeah.
For anyone searching
Totally.
for a name for a project, this
There's,
is of course
I mean,
a battle.
all kinds of considerations too, where it's like it needs to be easy to spell, right?
Yep.
It needs to be somewhat memorable. So if it's a long name, it's not going to happen. For my company, at least like Mystic is like somewhat memorable. Like that's the like action word if you want to think about it that
Absolutely,
way. And
yeah.
then Circuits is just kind of like if I just search Mystic Eurorack, like something, my shit's going to come up. So am I allowed to swear?
Yeah.
All right. So the naming consideration, I think a lot of people look at it as an afterthought, similarly to like the sort of like visual component of a lot of modules is sort of an afterthought for people. And I'm like, well, you could have the coolest module in the world, but if it doesn't look good, a lot of people aren't going to buy it. So if
So
you
true.
really, if you're, I'm not one to talk really because my company is very small, but I still like when I'm talking to people who want to start designing stuff, for some reason they ask me about it. And I'm like, if you really believe in your module and you think it's a really cool idea and you want it to do well, pay a friend of yours that's an artist to make it look good.
Yeah.
It's going to make a huge difference. And, it's nice to kind of spread the love around a little bit. If you're getting paid, like get one of your artists need to get paid too. So it's nice to have some element of like collaboration there.
Yeah, I think that's another great point that also speaks to artists, musicians, anyone again who's looking to spread the word to get the best possible coalescence of a project. You want to put the utmost support behind that thing, and I think collaboration is we talked about with Travarsi last week, very critical to that process.
Absolutely.
Right? It takes some of the pressure off your shoulders so you can focus on the things that you
Right.
want to focus on too.
Yeah, totally. And if you just kind of ask around, it'll turn out that you have friends that are able to help you with all kinds of stuff that it's going to be way easier than teaching yourself. Like, for example, I'm going to be working with a video editor pretty soon, and I had to teach myself all kinds of editing, this and that in order to work on my videos, and you can tell they are not professionally edited. And so
But
and
your
it takes
videos are great.
My videos they're enjoyable, but I am looking forward to having a professional editor to A, save me a bunch of time,
Indeed.
and B, make them look a little bit more polished. So
Yeah.
because like I could get away with having it be rusty in the beginning, but now I'd like to sort of take the videos more seriously. In fact, I have 100 0 HP modules ready to sell in my storage unit right now because I haven't made the video yet, and it's been like months. Like every single time I release something, I'm like, it takes me forever to work on the video, and so I'll always have it for way longer, just waiting until the video is ready to sell it, because building this stuff is fast and easy for me, and I
Sure.
have friends who help me out with that. But the editing, like for me, is just it's such a time consuming process. I'm really looking forward to having somebody else do that.
Yeah, especially when it starts to affect the productivity of your other things.
Yes,
That's a
very
problem,
much
right?
so. Yeah.
Let's talk about zero HP for a minute,
Sure.
and we'll
Yeah.
we'll swing
Do you
back
have
around.
any? I didn't actually bring
I
any.
do have a couple.
Cool.
Let me dig a couple out here.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, next to your Magic the Gathering deck.
the,
That's cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's all modular
All
in
right.
here.
Yeah.
So, okay, tell us about zero HP while I get these
All
up.
right. So zero HP are passive floating modules that sit in your cable forest and kind of achieve different utilities that you maybe don't want to dedicate the space or power consumption of an entire module for. So I usually suggest they're very good for semi-modular, like people who want to expand the capabilities of their semi-modular, or for a small system, or if you're on the road and you're like, man, this module that's really stunning but kind of big, like I need to save some space on it, but I also need a VCA or an envelope or some logic or something like that. So the one you're looking at right now is a VCA that works up to audio rate, and it's completely passive, and it just sits in the cable forest.
And when you say it sits in the cable forest, this is kind of like the those flying malts that we see,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. Yeah, it's inline is the term that people use.
right. You just patch it in between a couple of cables,
Right.
lay it on top of the
Yeah.
modular somewhere.
There's generally no controls. I have one that has a light sensor built in, but I don't necessarily want to start adding like little dials or anything like that to them, because
Sure.
I feel like that would be kind of cumbersome. So
Does that end up taking up more power coming through, or voltage coming through the?
it will cause some voltage drop because they're passive, and usually with something like a VCA, it'll like be attenuating your signal. So
Sure.
even when it's fully open, the signal will be slightly quieter. And that's just the nature of passive circuits.
Sure.
There's no way around it. But
Sure, but they're so handy to have
Yeah.
as an extra device, and
the low pass gate actually, the low pass gate and low pass VCA that are Vactrol based have very little voltage loss, but they have other compromises, which is that like it's very difficult to get Vactrols to all behave the same way.
Sure.
So it's like some of them are super snappy, and some of them have a really long decay, and there's generally a sort of range that I find acceptable, but I just don't have the time to make it like they're all exactly the same.
Sure. I
So-
mean that's a feature, not
yeah,
a bug,
well,
right?
right. Some people like it one way and some people like it the other. So
Sure.
I guess the only downside is that you could get it, you could get the kind that you don't like, and then shucks, you got to buy a couple of them, right?
Yeah, which let's at the price is probably reasonable,
Yes, they
right?
are all $33.
So you gotta you get
Except
a couple
the next
of them.
one is going to be 25, and in fact,
Oh.
I might actually lower the price of a couple of them that are sort of simple and inexpensive. So
Wow. Well, it's already a bargain, and I think the added value. I mean, aside from just being cheap and customizable and kind of like add them together however you see fit,
Yeah.
they're also not taking up your rack space, your
right,
valuable
and I think
rack
probably
space.
for a lot of people that is the larger consideration is
Exactly.
space, because as many of you are aware, it's a very addictive hobby where space quickly runs out, and yeah, I think that is certainly an attractive prospect to a lot of people, more so than the price. But obviously, the price is there too, and for anyone who wants to build them themselves, they're all fully open source, except for the envelope, which I somehow lost the file for. I might have to build that one again. But
So the only reason it's not open source is because you
because I
misplaced
haven't
the file.
found the file. Yeah,
Wow.
I did. I like transferred computers between when I built it and when I started like doing some more work on my GitHub. You can find the GitHub through my website, mysticcircuits.com. All of the files are up on there. If you want to build them yourself, that's totally fine. Just don't sell them. I'd prefer. But the envelope, yeah, I think I'm going to have to kind of like go off of this circuit board file and sort of make it as close as I can, and Yeah, that's the only reason the envelope isn't open sourced right now. Is just takes a little more work to get it back up and running.
That's very interesting. Um,
Yes.
what motivated you to? Well, maybe let's preface this by saying what is open source?
Open source basically means that all of the files that are used to design and manufacture the various products are freely available online. There is a license that indicates that basically if you use it in your own designs, you have to give some credit towards me and
Mm-hmm.
also to release those designs as open source as well. And that's really the thing I care about. I'm like, if you're benefiting from open source, you should also give back to open source, the open source community or whatever. And there are people who are releasing full size modules under open source, such as Mutable Instruments.
Mm-hmm.
4MS has done a couple. The music thing modules are all open source. And it enables people to build their own modules inexpensively, which is sort of I don't think was Emily's intention with Mutable Instruments
Yeah.
to do that, but it has like I know people who are like I would have never, owned a modular synth, but I've they've taught themselves how to solder and all of that kind of stuff working on the Mutable modules. So there's definitely like a dark side to open source, and we can get into that later if you want. But it is really cool that there's so many people out there who are building their own modular synths off of this open source stuff and making really good music out of it. The gosh, I had a second part to that thought and it just completely disappeared. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, so I release stuff under open source because first of all, my first module, the Vert, used a sort of expander protocol that was developed for the music thing Turing machine. I
Yep.
don't know if you did a video on that at some point. I feel like that might have come across your radar, but
Yeah, I've done not on the specific original Turing Machine
yeah,
module because unfortunately I don't have it, but
yeah,
I have done some stuff on the Turing Machine
yeah.
on previous videos and
So
critical device.
yes, very, very useful module that I love a lot, and decided to develop some other things for the Turing machine, both as expanders and also as hosts for the Turing machine expanders, because I really liked the protocol. It just, your normal power cable distributes positive, zero, and negative power, a central, like a clock bus, and then 8 gates. So basically, anything that has 8 gates, which is a lot of modules, can support the Turing Machine expansion protocol and give different options for that sort of thing. So I started making other modules that support Turing Machine expanders, such as the Vert, which was my first module, and now Tree also does that. And I so by the rules of the license, I had to release them as open source. But I wasn't complaining so much because I like open source. I benefited from the Turing machine being open source, and I benefited from the expanders being open source. And with Tree, it took me a little bit of time to release the files because I wanted to make sure that the files were as clean and as up to date as I could before I did them, because I knew that if I released them and then there was some tweak that needed to happen and like people had the wrong file, they might either build it wrong or get the wrong information from it. And that was actually okay, that was the second part of my thought earlier, is that open source also allows people to learn from your own designs and use aspects of that design in their own uh, products in a way that would allow them to sort of like save the time of having to learn all this stuff from scratch. So, for example, a lot of people, just build the Mutable Instruments modules, but a lot of people also use the Mutable Instruments development ecosystem, which allows you to upload firmware through an audio input for updates. So it means you don't have to have a USB port or any fancy programmers or anything like that. You just play an audio file in. The module sort of has some kind of you know recognition that it's about to accept a firmware update, and then the firmware is just piped in through the audio input, which is a really convenient system for users, right? You literally are just playing a file off of your phone. And then the other thing about it is it handles a lot of the driver stuff, which is like a lot of musicians can handle a certain amount of programming, right? Especially if you're into the synthesizers and like digital synths and stuff like that. You've probably done some amount. You have some familiarity with programming, but programming a driver is not
It's not the fun part.
not the fun part. Yeah. So, and it requires knowledge of the architecture of the device that you're using to a degree that is prohibitive for a lot of musicians. So, for me, anything that you can do to sort of like get all of that base layer stuff done and hand it off to somebody who has a really interesting musical idea but doesn't have the technical know-how to make it all from scratch is going to be really nice for fostering creativity in this ecosystem, I
Totally.
guess.
I look at it kind of like memes. I think about that
Sure.
that classic. One of my favorite memes is the poorly repainted Jesus portrait. If you look up, I think the meme is technically called Monkey Jesus or something like that, and it was a really poorly repainted image
Gotta
of
check this out now.
oh yeah, you have to check it
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe we can.
Yeah,
I'm
can
not
we-
even going to bring it out.
no,
You guys
don't
can
worry
look
about
for
it.
it.
Yeah.
But it was basically accidentally, not accidentally, intentionally repainted by an amateur like octogenarian who was a volunteer at a local
Oh
Spanish church.
yeah, I know.
And
I never realized that was Jesus.
she took it. Yeah, exactly. She
Wait,
took
was
it
this
upon
a
her.
restoration?
It is an attempted
Oh
restoration.
my
Yes,
God,
she was
that-
not supposed to do that, and she took it upon herself to restore this fresco. This
It's like a
600-700-year-old
priceless- yeah.
fresco. Yeah,
Oh man, I love
And,
that so much.
and so and from that, of course, that accident yielded so many joyful, just amazing memes.
Yeah.
And
I think Jesus would be happy with that.
that's exactly what I said. And I kind of view open source like that. It's
Sure.
an opportunity for a lot of people to benefit from the collective, in many cases, work of other people. And
Also, like, all you got to do is look at probably one of the most popular modules in existence, the Ornaments and Crimes, in order to
Absolutely, yeah.
see evidence of that. Because that thing now, especially with Hemisphere, which I actually have not installed yet, but I have been sort of like admiring from afar. Like,
Yeah.
that thing is a collaboration between like 3 or 4 people, and nobody asked like, "Hey, do you want to collaborate?" I mean, probably there was some communication.
In the
between
original,
them.
there was,
So there was some communication, but anybody can just take the firmware as it is and go like, "I think it would be an improvement if this feature was added," and do it themselves. And it's turned into this amazing device, which I use as a quantizer 99% of the time, but has a lot of really creative stuff inside of it that is simply not available in other modules, including a really solid quantizer that I use all the time. And
Yep.
frankly, I don't like a lot of other quantizers. So
yeah, I was
Yeah.
actually just reinstalling the Ornament and Crime, the latest firmware yesterday, and they continue to revise it.
Yeah,
It's shout out to the Ornament and Crime team.
definitely
They sent me one.
doing God's work.
Yeah, they sent me one really early on, and if you got an Ornament and Crime, go into our old videos and
To
watch
get the
those.
micro one, it's
That's one of my
a
next
very
ones.
nice. It's really easy to build too if you want to build it sometime.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, as far as surface mount stuff goes, it's pretty easy. You might need have you soldered surface mount before?
I have not.
Okay, maybe we could do like because I'm finally settling into my new place. I want to start doing the soldering workshops again, and
Ooh.
surface mount soldering is definitely on the docket. So maybe doing a run of Ornaments and Crimes for people building them themselves
Always,
would be a good one.
always amazing.
Where did you move?
Burbank.
Burbank, California.
You want
So you
trying to
kinda-
get all the stalkers to
Lovely
Even
Burbank,
closer.
California.
yeah, even closer. Exactly. I've been
Okay. I wanna take it when you do it.
yeah, absolutely.
I
I'm
have a
probably
lot of,
gonna do it through coaxial. I've been
Oh,
talking
sick.
with coaxial people about doing more classes and workshops there.
Shout out to Coaxial Labs
Coaxial is
in
an
downtown.
amazing resource and community hub. If you live in LA, you definitely gotta take a look at coaxial. And if
Yeah,
you
and
don't, they're doing a fundraising drive right now for a wheelchair accessible ramp. If you're the kind of person who likes to support the arts and culture, definitely take a look Coaxial Arts Foundation and see if that's something that you're interested in. Unfortunately, it's after the new year, so you can't write it off for this tax year, but they are a 501c3, so it is also a tax write-off to donate to them.
That's exactly where I was going with this, and
Yes.
I've been to a number of events down there. Really awesome little venue. It feels like a family type of vibe in there when you go to events. And if you've been to NAM, they've done some events right around NAM. Last year, I think, or was it last year or the year before? They did an LZX event, and I've seen quadraphonic modular performances
Yes.
there. It's one of the spaces that is extremely modular scene friendly, and the modular
But
scene
also
has
just like
reached
really
out.
weird art stuff that would have no chance of being not only like showcased but also attended if
Sure.
it had to go to a bar or a cafe
Oh, for
or
sure,
somewhere
yeah.
like that that has a really kind of financial motive where they need to put butts in seats.
Sure.
Coaxial is very much the kind of place where if you have a weird installation or some crazy you're a touring noise band or something like that, they want to support you. And so
Yeah.
yeah,
So there's
big
very
fan.
few places like that in LA. LA
Yes.
is such a sanitized, commercialized place
Right.
that
And even the
you know,
DIY spaces here, they kind of they have to pay the rent or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm not blaming anybody for that.
no, it's just the way it
just
is. Yeah.
running a contrast to coaxial, which obviously also has to pay rent, but is willing to, because it's a community kind of thing and a lot of volunteers work there, it's easier for them to sort of absorb the blow of being open for a Tuesday noise night where 5 to 10 people attend
Yeah.
or something like that.
And these are the type of spaces that we really want to. Yeah, we need them. We
Yeah.
want to try
Not
to
want,
support them.
Need.
Yeah, and,
Yes.
and especially in a like I said, in a town like LA where everything is so commercialized and
Right.
packaged and everything, places like Modular on the Spot and Coaxial Labs
Right.
and even our local synth stores often end up being places where we can hear art that we would never hear
Right.
in any other venue in LA.
Yes.
So I would just
It's very
encourage everyone
important
to
for
support these
making
things.
synthesizers more accessible and more widely recognized as well. To have there be places where, yes, obviously you need a certain amount of money to get a synthesizer, but also it's good to have a certain like a lot of people simply haven't heard of this stuff before, and then they try it for the first time and they're hooked. And they're like, I never want to touch Ableton again. And of course, there's a lot of, I'm being facetious, of course, but like, it is the first step is getting people to hear about this kind of stuff, and then going from there.
Yeah.
I love coaxial. That's the point.
It's also kind of like someone buying their first chemistry set. Or
Yeah.
it's another approach, I think, to, it's physics, right? It's,
Absolutely. Yeah, the modular synth is very much like a science experiment.
I remember having a talk with you, man, it's going to 5 years now,
Yeah.
maybe. And
Known
I
each
asked
other
you
a while
about
now.
the electrical engineering thing, and we were talking about how the chip, the Drano chip, and all this, like,
Yeah.
reality of going from, like, not creating software VSTs, right? And being able to do it, and how
Yeah.
exciting this time is. And
Yes. There's a lot of stuff that you can do now that was not possible even 5 or 10 years ago. And as in terms of just being affordable, even and accessible, and just the chips keep getting the same chip, like an ARM chip is the same price as it used to be, like 5 years ago, is now like 10 or 15 times, 100 times more powerful, whatever it is. I don't know these numbers off the top of my head, but
Sure.
the chips keep getting better, and
But
I
I
think
think
we're gonna
about
start seeing stuff that I think we're gonna start seeing like tidal changes in modular, where people are going to be connecting between modules like wirelessly.
Mhm.
There's going to be more sort of like data in the modular,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep
Machine
joking
learning.
about people patching USB. I have a feeling something like that is coming, and obviously I have like harebrained schemes of how I could accomplish that for my own modules, but it hasn't really like crystallized into something that I think is like ready for showtime.
Mm-hmm.
But I know like there's a lot of modules that patch I2C right now, which is sort
Yeah.
of like the microchip version of USB,
Mhm.
and there are both benefits and drawbacks to using it. And obviously there's modules that are using the 3.5 millimeter MIDI and stuff like that. I think that we are on the verge of something like that coming, which is going to blow all of that stuff out of the water. I have no idea what it is.
Wow.
I hope they design it right the first time.
Yeah, the gear just keeps getting smaller. The components keep getting smaller and more
Yeah,
powerful, and
yeah,
who knows where that's going to lead.
agreed.
Very exciting.
Yeah,
Big shout out to the chat room right now. Wambra,
yeah.
careful with that axe. Jane, noise bleeder, accidental trigger. Um, accidental trigger says he just patched a self-generating envelope in ONC. Um, any thoughts on Krell style envelopes? He says. That's a good question.
Because I know that like there is a specific patch which is the
The Krell
Krell
patch,
patch,
sure.
and then people will just refer to Krell as sort of self-generating style um, music or whatever. I certainly feel like having voltage control over your envelope opens a lot of possibilities, and I both of my envelopes in the case. I mean, I have the ornaments and crimes, but I don't use the envelope as often. Primarily because I'm too lazy to assign all the CVs to
Sure.
every single parameter of it. But I would say that just like with Krell patches for myself, not being the classical Krell patch, but sort of being self-generating patches, I feel like having voltage control over every every aspect of your patch, including the sequencer, the envelope, and stuff like that, that you wouldn't normally think of as being a voltage control target. A lot of people are just like, I want to control the filter. I'm going to take random and plug it into the pitch. Like having an envelope that is triggering or modulating something else, and then that other thing is modulating it, is
Yeah.
where I get a lot of really interesting self-generating patches from. So, uh, not feedback in the audio sense where you're plugging
Yeah.
things in the feedback in the patch chain into themselves. Like actually, you can get some really compelling Krell patches with a normal subtractive synthesis voice, but taking the modulation and using feedback in the modulation loop gets a lot of really interesting territory for me. And obviously, you need to attenuate stuff just so that it doesn't go into wild territory unless that's what you
Or
want.
just break
Yeah,
completely. Yeah.
exactly. Or stop oscillating or something
Right.
like that. You need to make sure that things are coming in, which are sort of like injecting energy into your feedback loop, so that it keeps the ball rolling. But yeah, for me, I have a Z4000 and a Mutable Tides, and both have a lot of modulation possibilities, and so it's really nice for me to be using one of those to modulate, let's say, an LFO or a sample and hold or something like that, and then have the output from that going back into the input. I get a lot of mileage out of that technique for Krell.
Yeah.
So hope
Very
that's
interesting.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, and feedback from CV feedback
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
And sequencer feedback too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
connecting one module to another and then back, the opposite direction again, where action within one CV manipulating source is affecting another one,
Mm-hmm.
and the results of that can be sometimes insane.
Yes.
Sometimes it can, like I said, maybe misspoke and said break. It won't really break. It will just maybe
It
go
will.
to an extreme and
Yeah.
stop. But
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah, that kind of system can be very interesting, maybe very chaotic without any control, but that's the
That's what
that's the
Krell's
fun of
all
it,
about.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So yeah, so Jolie Robot, Miss Robot Records in the crowd there. Happy New Year, everybody,
Happy New
and
Year, y'all.
we'll be getting into uh, maybe answering questions about modules that you got for the holiday times, maybe in a stream this week. But
Sure.
um, let's let's rewind 1 second here and talk about where Eli comes from. Tell us a little bit about your background. Why did you get into this stuff?
Sure. So in high school, I was really into noise and circuit bending kind of stuff. I really liked, I guess, like Rubber Cement was an artist I was following a lot. There was like Bastard Noise and Nautical Almanac, that kind of thing. I really liked Peter Blosser's instruments, and I knew that I wanted to make synthesizers, but not like by accident, the way you do with circuit bending, where you're just like messing around and you're like, oh, this is a cool thing I found. I'm going to feature that somehow. I wanted to make them intentionally. So I knew I wanted to go to engineering school. And because, there was some like uh, synthesizer programs out there, but mostly they were geared towards production and not towards manufacturing. And I've realized the reason why is because nobody makes money off of synthesizers. So it's a it's the kind of thing where you're not going to take on a bunch of debt because you want to make synthesizers. If you're doing that, you're going to work for a military contractor, or you're going to work for a telecom company or something like that. So somehow I've managed to do all right, but the thing was that I kind of had to make a square peg fit in a round hole in terms of like going somewhere where I could continue to learn about the musical side of synthesizers, but also um, get the sort of engineering skills that I could not teach myself. So I went to UC San Diego, uh, pretty much primarily because Miller Puckett taught there.
Oh yeah.
I've been into Max MSP and Pure Data since I was like 16 or 17 because it was the cheapest and easiest way for me to start designing synthesizers instead of just circuit bending and seeing, trying to break things. It was the first time I could be like, what happens if I plug, an oscillator back into itself or something like that. So I went to UCSD and did the engineering program, but I took as many electronic music classes as I could, just kind of like, bothered Miller and Tom Erb during their office hours and did the sort of independent studies and stuff like that with them whenever I could. And, just generally hung out with the sort of crew of people who were interested in electronic music there. And then when I graduated, all of the folks that I was following before I went to school who were doing the weird noise pedals where you would just kind of like, turn the knobs and that was it. They were all making modules at that point. So like 4MS, many people probably don't realize that 4MS started out making, kind of like ear bleeding noise modules.
Yeah, one of their first ones was the noise wash,
Yeah,
right?
the noise swash. Yeah, and that was their first module as well. It was a guitar pedal and then a module, and it is pretty nasty. Then the and I liked that about it, obviously. And then there was Trogatronic as well. I feel like there was a third company that jumped into Eurorack, but they're not. I'm not coming easily to mind at the moment, but it was the kind of thing where I actually had spent a lot of time being like, I want to control this guitar pedal with that thing or this circuit bent toy with that other thing, and literally like patched between toys and their bends and stuff like that and broke things a lot because it wasn't intended for that. But for example, like I had a feedback loop with a vocoder in the loop that accepted an external carrier, and then I would like talk into the vocoder and it would shape the feedback. And so I was controlling one thing with another. So it felt like a very natural progression to me where I was like, this makes sense to me to have one thing controlled by this other thing, and to have this open format where I can patch everything, because that was always such a thing with the DAW was it's so restrictive, right? It's like you can only ever you have to write every single note, and you can only have it controlling that one instrument. You can't say have this sequence with some other thing that is manipulating the sequence using parameters like knobs, and then have it also control that other sequence. Like that's simply not possible, or it wasn't at the time. Like DAWs are definitely starting to catch up to this sort of nonlinear way of making music. But in my head, the music was nonlinear already, so the modular synth was very attractive. And so, and for some reason, I thought it was going to be easier than building guitar pedals because you don't have to make an enclosure. And I was very wrong about that. Guitar pedals are like, like, yeah, way easier than designing modules. So
Wow, so that's very. So you got into the idea, the pursuit, really, of building synthesizers when you were still in your teens, before you got to high
yeah,
school.
yeah. I feel like I'm actually kind of lucky in that I knew what I wanted to do from a young age, and now obviously there's a part of me that's like wishes that I had stuck with music, because for a while I had chops and like could have gone to a conservatory or something, and now that's all gone. Like I haven't practiced scales in like years, and
But then we wouldn't have any
yeah, exactly.
modulars
It's like when
and
one door closes, another one opens. And I don't know if I necessarily want to be making synthesizers forever. Like, we'll see if I finally release the module that makes me my millions or whatever. But the I look at it right now as probably the least expensive way to gain the skills that I'm gaining, and then maybe at some point I'll do something that actually matters with those skills. But right now, like, making synthesizers is what I want to do, and it's what I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm very happy doing it.
this is the only thing that matters, man.
Yeah, well,
You know.
yeah.
Okay, good.
All other pursuits are
Yeah.
a waste.
Right, irrelevant.
Yeah.
Take that, military contractors.
Right. Well, I was thinking like power or something like that, or
Like trying to gain power,
no,
attaining power.
Yes, exactly. Through modular, the least efficient way to do it.
That's the way to the top.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's also take a moment and talk about Miller Puckett and Tom Erb.
Yes.
Tom Erb, I think, is a very well-known name in the modular world, as he works so much with Make Noise, and his name is emblazoned on one of their most popular modules, the Erb Verb, right? And also a prolific programmer and
Right.
plugin maker,
Soundhack and all of that.
Yeah.
Like his plugins are unique and amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, I first heard about his plugins from Trent Reznor talking about them, probably on MySpace or something, and I was like, well, I gotta have
miss
those.
MySpace.
I know it was such a
you
such
could like customize your page and
it was so much better.
make the pointer something silly.
And then in
Bring
the end
back
they
MySpace.
they
I need to
lose
go to
all of your
MySpace.
data, like they just erase it accidentally. Like, what more could you ask for from
Yeah.
a data collection company?
Exactly. Yeah.
You just burn it all by accident.
Yep. Oops.
I love that. That was like the final, just like
Well,
thumbs
they
up
had-
to America,
They had
to the world.
already extracted all of the useful stuff.
Maybe, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But
They'd
then all of
already
our
made your psychological profile, and then they're like, well, this data's just sitting here on these hard drives. I guess I'll unplug one.
let's do the world a favor and
Yeah.
get rid
Erase
of all
all
their
of-
embarrassing
Right.
photos.
Yeah, exactly. All of the emo cuts that would have never faded away.
Okay, so back to Miller Puckett and Tom Erb for a
Right,
moment, because
yes.
I feel like they are.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you for a second?
Of course you can.
I just want to encourage everyone in the chat to go see Cats in theaters. This movie is never going to be in theaters again. And let me put it this way. Me and my friends all went expecting to go and make fun of it, like a B movie where you go and you're like, oh, that's silly. Like, haha, this movie sucks so much. We loved it. It was so good. I don't know if any of you have seen the musical, but if you haven't, it's even more confusing. And the CGI is not it's not bad. It's unnerving. It's well done CGI that's unnerving. And all of you should go see Cats while you still can, because it's probably never going to be put in theaters again.
I feel like I had similar expectations for the stage show of Cats,
Right.
and similar reaction when I saw it. I thought it was going to be an absolute catastrophe, and then it was actually really like
Catastrophe.
kind of enjoyable. Yeah,
Yeah.
catastrophe.
Yeah,
But I have not yet seen the movie, so
definitely got to see it. All
the
of
star
you.
power alone.
Yes.
I mean, come on.
I know that was
Talk
the
about
thing that sent me
collaboration.
over the edge. I was like, oh my god, all these amazing actors and actresses are in this movie. Like, what am I missing here? Right?
It's the Ishtar of our times.
Yes,
Um,
indeed.
so that's I think an important side note
I
that you
just
just
wanted
made.
to make sure to get that in there while the conversation was flowing.
Yeah,
you
we
know.
gotta keep the music
Yeah,
flowing in
gotta
America
plug.
here.
I'm sorry, can I plug something? All of you should go see Cats.
Cats.
Yeah.
It's a small
Yeah,
small
it's an
production.
indie movie.
You probably haven't heard of the creator behind the work.
If you own a cat, take your cat with it.
Yeah.
You know.
Put your cat in a bag.
Don't
Yep.
go sober.
Yeah. Everyone take your cats with you to
Yes.
see cats.
They'll appreciate that. You'll finally
Yeah.
know how to properly address a cat.
Yeah.
It's important information for
Yeah.
a synth person. I feel
Absolutely.
like. Do you have any cats?
No, I don't have any pets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did Miller Puckett or Tom Erb have any cats?
I don't think so.
We need to get them some cats.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's weird.
I know, right?
So Miller
Just
Puckett.
just ship a cat to them.
Yeah, no.
One will show up
That
at
could
your
get
front
us-
door
With a-
tomorrow.
in a
That could get us
bag.
kicked off
Yeah, I
YouTube.
know.
Let's not ship any cats.
No.
What?
Parody.
Yes, it's all parody. What? What is Miller known for?
So Miller technically wrote the signal processing code for Max MSP. MSP actually is the Miller's.
Brainchild.
No, the actual letters of MSP are like Miller's
Oh, yeah.
name.
Right, Miller.
I forget the word
Something
for that.
Puckett.
Yeah, Miller something Puckett. Exactly. But I guess Miller and unfortunately David Ziccarelli, who
Yeah.
currently runs Cycling 74 and owns Max, although they got bought by Ableton. They had some creative differences as to the direction of the thing. I guess it was.
I mean,
Nasty
Ableton is
breakup.
Max, right?
Yeah, exactly. Ableton was made in Max MSP before it. It is not awful. It's amazing, and you should go watch it. So the
Meow.
I don't know the details, but all I know is that it was a nasty breakup, and afterwards Miller was basically like, "Well, I'm going to make this open source now," and so Pure Data is open source and free, and it runs on basically anything. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi. It runs Linux, which is a godsend for those of you who hate the top two operating systems. It can run on a phone. People have gotten it running on old Palm Pilots, and just like and everything. Like you can get Pure Data to run on everything. It also can be used to export. You can use it so people will. There's something called libpd, which is basically like a C library that uses Pure Data as its backbone. So you can design a patch in Pure Data and then export that into a program that is like a normal C program. So people use it for video games.
Oh,
They
wow.
use it for art installations. They use it as just sort of like the audio driver for their own I guess creations, programs, whatever. And obviously, you open it and you compare it to Max MSP, which is polished and well supported, and it comes with a search bar and stuff like
That
that.
whole tutorial system.
Yeah,
right?
all of that stuff, and you open it and you're like, oh, I see why this is free. I can't even like make a patch cord go in at angles or something. It all goes in straight lines.
Mhm.
But the restrictions I find to be actually very inspiring, and also because it comes with less, it encourages you to do the stuff for yourself, so you're not just kind of accepting these objects from the creators that do everything for you in a way that you don't really like understand what's going on. So it forces you to be a little bit smarter about how you handle a lot of um, challenging stuff. And I now use both. I basically I did Max 5, and then for a very little while, like I didn't learn all of the new features they added to Max 5 even, and then I transitioned to Pure Data, and then I've come back to Max. I do Max 7 now. I think I still need to upgrade to 8, and like, oh my god, they added so much stuff. It's honestly kind of overwhelming.
It is
Like,
a little bit.
yeah, the stuff they added is really cool, but it feels like it's going to take me a really long time to, or maybe like taking a class or a tutorial, because I go through the tutorials and I'm like, okay, I'm getting this, and then I try and use it on my own. It's not necessarily, the information doesn't stick, I guess.
Sure.
I don't know.
It's
I
stuff
learn
you have to
better in
do
a
as
class.
you take it, I think.
Yeah.
But it's it's such a saturated tool set now.
Yeah.
It's got a little bit of everything, a lot of bit of
Right.
everything, and
Which
the
is
whole
great, actually,
Windows.
because you don't have to use it all. You can just be like, this is the thing that
Exactly,
really
yeah.
appeals to me. And so I find myself patching basically like I did in Max 4 or Max 5, very like intentionally doing everything, not really using the attribute system or anything like that very much at all. And I get a lot out of it. And I know that I could be getting a lot more out of it if I spent the time to learn all of that stuff. But, I run a company and all of that. So I have to be very selective with my time.
Sure.
And at a certain point, like I've been doing a lot more in jitter with Max, and I'd like to learn a lot more about the sort of the 3D rendering stuff, which I don't use as much. I'm mostly using it for 2-dimensional processing. But they are both very powerful systems, and Miller Puckett was instrumental in the creation of both of them. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Critically important figure in our modular
Yeah.
world.
He's
today.
also just working on interesting stuff. Every time I'd come in, check out what he was working on, he'd be like, "I'm working on a pitch tracking project with a guitarist who uses like a hex pickup, so we can more accurately like get the data out of the guitar." And it's weird, interesting sort of boundary pushing stuff.
Wild.
Yeah.
Very wild. And let's. Dill Pickle says, "I feel like this podcast smells like cheddar." If you're talking about money, you're wrong.
Cheddar.
Smells like coffee in here, if anything. So, but
I guess Dill Pickle is also Tom Erb's
son.
child.
Yes, he claims to be Tom Erb's son.
Right.
Well, we're in the presence of royalty.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at your rack here and some of the modules you're working on. Let's.
Yeah.
Do you have a Vert with you?
No.
Tell me about Vert, because Vert is, and we can show it here.
Yeah.
But it is that was one of the things that just boggled my mind.
Sure.
When you showed it to me.
Yeah. Vert is a analog to digital converter. And basically what that means is it takes your signal and it chops it up into little slices, and then it sends all of the information about which slice your signal is in out through different gate outputs. And that's an incredibly oversimplified version of what it is, but it basically converts your signal to binary, which is how a computer understands analog voltages and audio and all of that sort of thing. And then it sends every bit of the binary number out different outputs. And basically what that does is it lets you take, let's say, an LFO, you plug it into Vert, and it turns that LFO into a like a drum pattern where you have 8 different drums that all correspond to the shape of the LFO. So you can have an LFO that's going at particular speed, and if you change the shape of that LFO, your pattern is still going at the same speed, but it's changed the pattern.
Same
So
tempo, but different
exactly
shape.
different shape to it, and the pattern will. It's really good for creating like off kilter rhythms, because if you patch in a sawtooth, everything is going to happen at a very evenly spaced pace. But if you patch in a sine wave, things will kind of speed up and slow down with the shape of the sine wave. So it'll sort of like go slower towards the middle of the wave, and then speed up as it's rounding the curve and changing directions, and then go slower again. So,
And as as the LFO or whatever CV signal you send in is changing, it's the module is converting that to some sort of number value,
yes,
right? Somewhere between 0 and whatever 8 digits of binary numbers can reach
right.
to as
Yeah,
128 or
so
something.
it's 256.
256. Okay, so somewhere between 0 and 256, and then it's converting that into the 8-digit binary number
Yes.
of zeros and ones, eight zeros and ones, depending on what value it's currently set to or currently reading, and then those zeros and ones are assigned to 8 different outputs.
Yeah.
And can send triggers or not send triggers.
And then, of course, with the expanders, like this hosts the Turing machine expanders, as I was mentioning earlier.
Right.
So is, for example, an expander that mixes all of your bits together, and you can use that to get really weird kind of voltage sequences out of something like this. Yeah.
So instead of just bits,
it'll give you a static voltage.
Like a stepped a DC current
Exactly.
of some sort. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So you could use it to sequence you could turn an LFO into 8-gate sequence and a voltage sequence.
That's like to me that was one of the most mind-boggling modules and like outside the box thinking modules that I'd ever heard of when I saw it. We do have a video from a few years back on our channel, so go check that out if you want like a walkthrough of.
Actually did a really good job of explaining binary too, which is always the thing that I struggle with.
And it's the hardest thing to like explain to someone
Yeah.
without a visual aid. So
Yeah,
that's why I
exactly.
referenced that video.
Yeah.
But there's it's one of those modules that I'll take with me and explain to people and show them, and with the intention of showing how left field modular can be.
Yeah.
It can go so far from what you perceive as being a normal musical usage of math or musical content.
Right. Or just also like using the same circuit but adding new features or something like that, which is how a lot of modular companies do stuff. It's like, here's a ladder filter, but it has an envelope built in, or just as
Exactly.
like an example. Like a lot of these ideas have been done to death, and
Sure.
there's certainly a use for that sort of design, but it's not something that I'm interested in really.
Yeah. So if you want more information about Vert, you can go check out. It's still in production, or you still have?
I'm
Okay.
working on I have not started design, but I have not started prototyping, but I know what the design is going to be for the Vert Mark II.
Oh,
So
cool.
that is, off on the horizon, certainly not about to happen, but the Vert is essentially sold out like everywhere at this point. So I figured now's a good time to start.
Let me
thinking
mind meld
about-
with you. So I
What?
can
Yeah,
see
exactly.
it. Oh wow! Shoot.
Yeah, you're gonna
Damn.
want one.
Whoa. Oh, the video's coming. I see it.
Yeah.
All right. Man, don't
Yeah.
worry, guys. It's on its way.
Yeah.
So okay, well, sorry for the tease then.
No,
But
that's fine.
let's talk about what's current. Like, what are
Sure.
you currently working on? Let's maybe bring the camera
So,
around over
yeah,
there and look at
let's
what you
do
got.
that. Would now be a good time to run to the bathroom really fast? Just while we're rearranging the cameras and stuff?
Sure, and maybe
Yeah.
we'll talk to the audience about
I'll
their
be
questions
right
and things.
back.
And we can ask Dill Pickle more about his family life. Let's see. Okay, well, just put this out there right now. NAMM is coming up in a couple of weeks, and if you guys see anything in the announcements, any products, any whatever otherwise it might be, then please let us know. We're going to try to discuss those things. We're going to try to address new announcements as they come out. Maybe some things to look at right now would be the new Erica Synths case, which is pretty cool. They just announced a new 104 HP 6U case, and we all need a solid case. I think it was like 500 euro, something like that. But it was super light. It was aluminum, I think, and looked pretty nice. What else? I think we're on the verge of an announcement from Korg about the or a ARP 2600 remake. That's the rumor, anyway. Maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves talking about that right now, but it might be coming soon. What else? You hear about anything else, Vic?
I don't know. Maybe the Behringer ARP? No, I'm just playing.
That's supposed to be coming sometime soon.
My news tablet is out of power, so I'm out of power.
Okay. We need to get that taken care of, but let's see.
No, we're good.
Okay, so let's.
That's coming.
We're gonna twist this thing around here. Any questions from the audience that we can pass along to Eli would be great.
Hey, Eli.
Here he is.
Yeah,
Here I am.
All right.
dude.
Let's do this. Okay, so what happened after UCSD?
Well, I guess I started out doing DIY modules. And just kind of selling those, getting used to the process of building and selling stuff. And then I started building Turing machines with the rainbow lights. Some of you maybe saw those. Those were fun to work on and all of that. My first actual design was an expander for the Turing machine that let you change the length of the Turing machine's sequence and do that with voltage control. And then from there, just kind of kept going. Built the Vert, built the Spectrometer, which I also happen to not have with me, and then moved to LA from San Diego, which was a fantastic decision. I love San Diego, but there are a lot more modular users up here, so there's sort of like a greater breadth of knowledge that I can have access to, and also just people who use it professionally for their work, either professional musicians or sound designers, you know, um, production people who run studios, stuff like that. So it's been really nice to have access to feedback from folks who are going to be using this in a professional setting. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's been a big part of improving my design philosophy has been finding the right people to ask because everybody wants different things from the modular, and it's always a sort of give and take between different design philosophies. Like, do you make things big so that it feels weighty and is easy to use, or do you make it small because people are going to be touring with it and need it to be, compact? So there's a million of these decisions go into making a module, and so having the right feedback can make a really big difference as to.
And one accommodation in one direction has an effect in others, right?
Absolutely.
If you make it slimmer for the traveling case, it has to be maybe a little bit deeper,
Right.
or,
Exactly. So I kind of I try and find a balance. Some of my modules are designed to be compact, and some of them are designed to be a little bit more luxurious and have more space, and like kind of the old 4U, I guess 5U system of of design where your module has one big knob that does the main function of your module, and as opposed to something like Tree, for example, which is much more slender and and economizes space. Um, yeah,
Maybe we can get some more light over this way too.
sure.
What
I think it looks fine on
is it
the.
okay?
I think so.
If you
Yeah.
guys want to, maybe this is a great reason to swing back to the website for viewers, so you can get a really good view of what these modules look like. But let's talk about their usage.
Okay.
What do you want to start with? What
Yeah.
is
Well,
current?
right now tree is patched up, and I actually also have, excuse me, an upcoming expander for tree patched in.
Let's talk about it first. So we
Yeah.
can hear it.
So tree is a sequential switch, 6 HP, 8 channels, bidirectional. For those of you who don't know what a sequential switch is, it kind of does like if you've ever had a module with say different waveforms and you switch between the waveforms with a dial and it kind of makes that click where it's changed to another setting. A sequential switch is basically something that does that rotary switch sort of action but in a sequence. So if I was to unplug all the modulation here, you can see we have this sort of light tracer. Um, the lights traveling downwards. Basically, what that indicates is that this common input output jack is connected to whichever one of these jacks has the light on next to it um, at that particular point in time.
Effectively, a sequencer, but for input
Electrical
signals,
connections,
right?
basically.
So
Yeah.
instead of
So
stepping through like values, it's stepping through which input is currently routed to the output.
exactly, or vice versa. So, for example, you could have 8 different voltage sequences here, and stepping through those allows you to select which voltage sequence is currently patched into your oscillator. So it can be an interesting way to sort of scramble different musical phrases. You could also have, let's say, an LFO patched into here and be sending that to one of 8 places, so that you only have temporary modulation of different parameters and they aren't just being fully modulated all the time. It can be a nice way to have modulation in your patch in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. So, for example, only 1 out of 8 steps has modulation on the VCO or modulation on the filter or modulation on whatever it is, but it gives you a little bit more space in that regard and also lets you sort of economize on the things that you have in your system. So patching in one LFO into a sequential switch in a way gives you 8 LFOs because it's going to 8 different places. So that's sort of how I think about.
And then can those so it can give you the option of sending to different places, and then can it go to multiple places at a time as well?
Um, I have an expander coming out for it that will let you do stuff like that.
Ah,
That is not currently how it works. It's one one destination
right.
basically.
That's how the kind of traditional
Yes.
sequential switch
But
works.
because it's bidirectional, it means that you can have one input going to what let's say one output going to 8 inputs, or you can have 8 outputs going to one input. So the module just makes a connection like a switch. It doesn't care which direction the stuff is going after that.
It's very wild.
Yeah.
And earlier we were talking about how in DAW we lack certain modular flexibility that we might find in a modular synthesizer.
Yeah.
One of those things you mentioned being if you have a sequence of notes, it's going to one instrument most
Yes.
likely. This allows you to send a sequence of notes to all kinds of different places. And
Exactly.
you could switch it up mid-sequence. You could, you build in for every eighth note or 16th note, it's going to different
Exactly.
places. So
Perfect. Yeah.
sweet. Okay, so that's awesome. What else?
So
Should we talk about tree some more? Should we turn
yeah,
up the
no,
volume
let's talk
so we can
about
hear it?
tree as well. So the thing next to tree is a voltage sequencer expander that allows tree the way that tree works to also control a set of sliders and give you a voltage sequence out. So what's unique about tree is not that it's a sequential switch, it's that it has these shift inputs. So if I was to, oh, we're already on step 0. If I was to plug a gate, let's say this gate, into one of these shift inputs, I can temporarily shift the sequence position by 1, by 2, or by 4. And Joe, as you know binary, you would know that adding these three numbers together lets you address the sequence position in all 8 steps. So you can see here, I'm actually
0 through 7.
0 through 7, yeah, exactly, or 1 through 8, whatever. But essentially, I don't have a clock going in at all. I'm just driving the sequencer position with 8 steps. Or sorry, I'm driving the sequencer position with 3 gates that address 8 steps. And if I was to plug that into an oscillator, give me just a moment.
Okay.
So I'm going to plug this voltage sequence into Platts.
Which I erroneously advertised as our show.
I'm happy to
topic
talk
this week.
about Platts, but yeah.
Let's talk about Mystic Circuits.
Yeah,
we'll
sure.
talk about Platts.
Yeah, and
another
Platts
day.
has plenty of.
Can we
all
put
right.
your hat on?
What? Oh yeah. I don't know if it's gonna fit on the.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. As an aside, I think the audio should be running.
Ready to go? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's turn it on.
Let's see what we got. All right. So if we look here, you can see we have 8 steps, and this voltage sequence is being controlled by the sort of binary addressing parameters of tree. So you can see the lights are moving together.
So the clock is moving around which.
The clock is not moving it. You're getting these 3 gates that are just shifting the position, right?
Aha.
So you can see this gate, I believe. No, this one is currently shifting bit 1. And then if I plug another thing in, we're getting 1 plus 2 gives you the first 4 steps. And then if you add 4 to that, you get the second set of 4 steps. So it gives you this weird way to kind of find different paths through 8 steps in a way that's no longer an 8-step sequencer, right? So I look at it more as like 8 possibilities instead of 8 steps. And of course, if we were to plug in the clock, you get just a normal 8-step sequence. But if you plug in shift and clock, they actually work in conjunction. So you get something that feels like a normal 8-step sequence, but it has more sort of variety to it. And if you plug into everything, you get some really weird aleatoric stuff. And you can see this isn't an 8-step sequence anymore. It's not. It's actually, we would have to do some math to figure out how long it'll take to repeat itself. But you have these 8 steps, and so it feels very musical. There are also several other outputs on leaves. Leaves, first of all, can chain. So you can have a whole bunch of leaves plugged into your tree or your Turing machine or your vert, and they will distribute across the expander information and power so that you don't need to have a fancy cable or anything like that. There are also 4 outputs. So the first output gives you the top 4 steps. The second output gives you the middle 4 steps. The third output gives you the bottom 4 steps. And then the last output gives you all of the steps. So currently we're listening to the last output for notes because we want to have a note on every single step.
So if we were to patch to one of those other outputs, we would only hear part of the sequence?
Exactly. And so for example, I'm going to patch that into the harmony on Platts, and you can hear sometimes the modulation is off and sometimes it's on. And the nice thing about that is it acts more as like an accent, where like you have modulation every once in a while, but it's not on all the time. Another cool thing about that is that every output has its own transpose input at the top. So if I wanted to plug an LFO into that output, sorry if I keep hitting the mic, folks. So we have an LFO, going into the harmony that also has the values from the sequencer being added to it every once in a while. So you can get some really nice.
So that shifts the sequence then?
It's not shifting the pitch sequence; it's shifting the modulation.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So we're hearing a different set of notes now.
Right.
Whenever
but
that is
we
shifting.
could use this as a normal
The
transpose.
same set of notes, but in a different order, I should say.
I'm pretty sure my main sequencer is in fact currently tied to the what you call it, the tempo of my clock divider. So if I was to add, sorry, it's hard to do this with all the camera stuff in the. So you can hear we're getting transposes. And if I go back to gate, I love this sequencer, by the way. So we now have a 5-step sequence that is transposing the sequence going on from tree. And if I change the divisor, I can make it a bit slower. I think that's slower. Yeah. So you can see now it'll change the transposition.
Oh.
And it gives
Very
you
cool.
like a really complicated sequence that you would not easily be able to make by hand. It's generative, but you have a lot of control over how it's happening. There's no randomness, nothing like that. And then I can just like, I don't know, turn this dial. Completely changes the whole thing. So,
Magic.
yeah. And of course,
that's the genius of your modules. Is once you have the setup going, you have to do very little to have some completely altered version of what you were hearing a moment earlier, and it's just variation
yeah,
city.
I'm very interested. I personally am easily bored.
Yes.
So I like music that surprises me, and I like to make modules that make it easier to add variety. I'm sorry, Noise Bleeder, you were asking if it's deep. Do you mean tree or
Skiff friendly? Yeah, tree.
So tree is skiff friendly. It is 2 boards, so it is not. It's not. I guess the depth is listed on my website, which is mysticcircuits.com. If you need to know exactly how skiff friendly it isn't terribly deep. Leaves is one single circuit board, so it won't go as. Ornaments and Crimes guy worked on what too?
I think so. Yeah.
On what? Tree?
Oh.
No, Tree is just a Mystic Circuits product.
No, he's asking if Ornament and Crime is driving that sequence.
Oh yeah, Ornament and Crime is the currently the quantizer.
And then Noise Bleeder was saying he just sold a larger Erica synth sequential switch and expander, and is thinking trees might be a good.
Oh, Performer. I actually
alternative.
don't know. I think Performer is just one person, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Ornaments and Crimes people contributed to it, or if the Ornaments and Crimes, some of the code from Ornaments and Crimes ended up in Performer, which is also open source and is a really great module. I have not even barely scratched the surface of. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a really fun module.
The interface is really nice. It's hard to find. There's a lot of modules out there that have really amazing features and just have interfaces that I did not gel with for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And the way that the Performer interface works is very intuitive to me and
It's
very
very
well
important.
thought out. Yeah,
Very
exactly.
important with
Especially if
these
you're writing
sequencers.
music, you don't want to be fighting with the interface. You want to be creating. So for me, for whatever reason, like even with Fruity Loops, like I really got the interface, even though it's a much more limited than Ableton, which for whatever reason just did not work the way that my brain worked. So
Yeah, there's certain things in there that just jive with the way certain people think. And,
exactly.
same thing goes with sequencers. It's a hard thing to crack, but definitely one of those things people have been trying. One of those puzzles people have been trying to solve.
Yes,
for a number of years.
sequencers are a tricky beast because it's easy to just keep throwing new stuff into there.
And they
but
get bigger and bigger.
And they get bigger and bigger. But what really works for a sequencer is simplicity, right? And so it's you're riding this razor's edge of like I want to add features, but I also want to keep it simple. And I personally like having a tree around because if I just want an 8-step sequence, it's really easy to do that. It has the transpose too, so now it has the transpose, so it makes it easy to be able to do stuff like that. And then if I want just like a little bit of variety, just patch into +1. And I don't know if you can hear that. Maybe we turned it up for a little bit. Just the way that driving it with 2 gates adds a really nice. It's a
It's a
really nice
counterpoint.
pattern. Yeah,
it sounds like a call and response type of composition all
right.
of a sudden.
Yeah,
Though
totally.
the sequence is not being changed at all, it's just the same 8-step sequence transposed.
Right, and the fact
Offset.
that the clocks don't perfectly line up makes it really, really nice to have sort of like different. It's not a polyrhythm, but it's like a polymeter, I guess. I don't know. It's
Let's not upset Div Kid here. It's
yeah,
polymeter, right?
okay, yeah. I would do what? Yeah. It's just a nice way to add variety to something that would normally be static, and obviously, like just throwing random out there is a really dissatisfying way of doing that. And that's what I love about modular is that you're able to start off with something that is really normal and natural. Actually, let me even unplug the transpose so we can hear just tree. So this is just tree's sequence before it had transpose in it, and yeah, it's such a simple concept, but there's no randomness, and it provides a really like nice evolving pattern over time. And so to me, like especially because I hate staring at screens, having the interface be patchable and modulatable is how I think about synthesis. And so I try and do that with my modules as opposed to being like, if you double tap this and hold that, well, obviously I don't have much in the way of digital modules. I do have my first digital module here, and we can take a look at that later. But I'm trying to avoid the sort of like mission creep that happens with a lot of modules where it's like, hold these 2 buttons and then, gently rotate this one towards the sun, and you'll get into the secret menu where you have to bring up, oh, it turns out you don't have the internet, so this rave is canceled, like. So I like stuff where you can look at it and immediately know what's going on.
Very sick, and just keeps shifting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, let's talk about. That's really a sick module, and I think a sequential switch is one of those things that is so useful in so many ways.
Yes.
Not just for sequencing, or we did a video a while back using multiple oscillators and sequencing through the switch at an audio rate,
Exactly.
which gives you what do they call it? It's basically creating a chain of waveforms. Cycle by cycle.
You see like a train.
Exactly.
Not only can you run it at audio rate, you can run it at video rate. So
Bam.
tree is analog, and it will work into the megahertz range.
That's.
I'll have a demo. I finally
fascinating.
got my video capture setup working correctly, so I will have a demo of it working with video fairly soon.
We'll have to have you come back and do a video episode.
Oh man, I would love that. I love video synths, and it's if you think audio modular is a rabbit hole, oh my god, just seeing the stuff that people do with video modular, just to do the things that are so easy to do on a computer.
Yeah.
But like really crazy stuff comes out of it that you could never necessarily come up with on a computer, just because the interface is different.
And it's so liquid in a hardware environment.
Yes.
So, I think that's an important point here is that you've been diving into video modular, aside from jitter, which you mentioned earlier.
I mean, I don't want to talk about it too much just because I don't really have anything to show.
Sure, we'll get into that again.
But yes, video modular is a thing that is growing in popularity, and it is very bizarre and interesting, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of how audio modular was 5 or 10 years ago, in that it is mostly enthusiasts that expect that there is not, they aren't going to make $1 billion doing this, because it is, with audio, it's really easy to, it's not necessarily easy, but yes, I am currently developing 2 video modules, and one of them is very, very close to being finished. With video, it is very difficult to monetize having a video modular synth. It is almost purely for enjoyment, or for like playing your friends' shows or something where you get gas money at the most. There are obviously people who use video modules. JJ Stratford is one who comes to mind. She has analog video studio and does a lot of music video stuff, but
Mm.
there are really only so many people out there who can probably manage to do something like that. With audio, there are a lot of ways to make money doing it, such as sound design. Obviously, you can be a professional musician. You can do what do you call it, like scoring for movies and TV. Like there are avenues to make money using audio modular, and so actually um, people are getting uh,
Monetizing it,
monetizing
basically.
it in a way that makes it so that a large company like Behringer or Roland can look at the market and be like, oh, there is something going on here where people are making money. I don't think that I kind of doubt that video modular is ever going to reach that point simply because it is so much less practical than using a computer. And so all of the people who are into it for purely aesthetic and like uh, they're enthusiastic about it in a way that modular synths used to be like that a little while ago. And obviously there's like benefits and downsides to how it is now. I think it's great that
Sure.
more people are using it. I think it's great that a lot of people are able to make a living off of it. Even companies that lots of us have never heard of. I keep meeting people who are like, yeah, I pay all of my expenses with my modular synth company, and it's some company I've never heard of on the other side of the world. And I'm like, that's rad. I think that's really cool. But yeah, video kind of has the video community is a little different now. I can actually turn it down on my
Okay,
side. That might
whatever.
even be easier because then I don't have to ask you to turn it
Okay.
up.
Um,
Sorry, point of order.
great points, and I think maybe this is another unpredictable realm of the industry where
Sure.
as resolutions and HD futuristic HD
Uh,
amalgamations
yeah.
are procured, so will people pine for that
Yeah, the
old
old.
different way
I
of doing
remember
things.
when YouTube videos were 240p and we still laughed about them.
I
Shoes, oh my god.
we've been thinking about doing. Noise Bleeder says here that his wife wants to get into video modular, and he's going to have to save a kidney,
So LZX has some
sell a kidney.
options coming up out that will be more self-contained and affordable and offer a certain amount of flexibility.
Of course, they have the Vidiot
The Vidiot,
already.
I believe, is out of production. You probably can still get Vidiots at um, retailers.
Stores.
I have not been really watching, but I know that the video is at some point leaving production, and they're working on digital modules that will sort of
Oh wow.
have the higher definition. I think probably a lot of the production stuff. I think that I think that LZX was not prepared for just how popular the video was going to be, and so did not make it. They made it in the, and this is just me purely speculating. They made it in a way where it would be easy to make hundreds of them, not like thousands or however many. They've sold a lot of vidiots, so
Sure.
I think that they are working on newer designs that are self-contained in the sort of way that the Vidiot is, and also can patch into the modular, but are maybe easier to mass produce.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm really happy for LZX having achieved the level of success that they have,
Really,
and
one of the
so
pioneers of that market, the Euro rack
yes,
video market.
literally a pioneer.
Yeah.
Nobody had done that. I mean, they had done that stuff historically, but nobody had made it in Eurorack accessible for public consumption. It was like you needed to be a TV studio to even know the people to buy these devices from, and they very quickly went outdated. So,
Hmm.
um,
And you
yeah,
do some visual performance.
yeah,
You've been
yeah.
doing some at the Fat Grabbers.
Yes, Fat Grabbers is a event thrown by Moment Trigger, who throws some of my favorite events in LA. They do anywhere from harsh noise to harsh techno to every once in a while some pretty ambient stuff sneaks in. But
They like it harsh.
they like it harsh. They throw a great party, and they're very lovely people, and they have me out to do visuals every once in a while, and yeah, I love doing it. It's nice. It's purely for my own enjoyment. There was a period in time where I considered um, becoming a VJ professionally because I was doing it a lot in San Diego. In fact, I was going to clubs before I was 21 doing visuals for these sorts of things. And that's a big part of how I got into electronic music that wasn't just your ear getting sawn off.
Interesting.
So I was doing visuals for these places and I was doing feedback with video, which was sort of like, novel to me. Of course, people have been doing that forever, but I was like, well, I used to do feedback with guitar pedals. Why don't I just do that with video and try and make it like visually appealing?
And it's so fun
It's
with
really fun.
video.
Yeah, it's really I really like bringing video setups to places and making it easy for people to interact with it on their own. And so at some point when I have the time, I'm going to be focusing more on that sort of thing. All right, now obviously the company takes up every last bit of free time that I have, and yeah, video is great, but
Were
again,
you
I don't
using
have any video stuff to show.
Were you
So
using Jitter for that back in the day?
I was using another program. I can't even. I think it was Visual Jockey Gold. It was a free modular video program that just
Oh
came
wow.
with a bunch of weird effects that I put into a feedback loop. And then eventually I transitioned to Pure Data, which had Gem at the time, but Gem
Mm,
like could barely play like 480p videos. I
mm.
had to encode it in all these weird ways. The feedback looked really pixelated and I had a decent graphics card too, so it was just because I was stubborn about not using Windows. I was using Linux mostly, and then I went back to Jitter basically because the Pure Data video was interesting but not very capable. Since then, new the person who developed Gem in the first place has upgraded it. I believe it's called Ophelia, and it runs Open Frameworks. So
Ah,
yeah, Open Frameworks is a very popular um, video and rendering sort of software library. So I haven't played with Ophelia yet, but at some point when I have some time, I'm very excited to check that out. Yeah, so I was
yeah.
running that stuff on the computer. Obviously, I couldn't afford a video modular. I still basically can't afford a video modular, but um,
But that kind of gave you the access to one in a
yeah,
sense.
exactly. I had some experience with video before starting the video modular route, and uh, yeah, it sort of went from there. I was talking with Lars a bit and expressed interest in developing video modules simply because, as you can tell, I like the rainbow aesthetic, and I believe that modular has a very visual component that's very important. And Lars was very encouraging and has helped me with some of my designs that weren't even related to video, just out of the kindness of his heart. Lars is an amazing human being, and if you have the capability to do so, definitely buy some stuff from Lars.
Yeah, not just a pioneer, really
It's a
the
really
forefather of what's happening now,
and just
and
awesome
supporter,
human.
and yeah, I mean he's driving this whole thing, and
Yes.
he has such a deep love for it, and is such a genius in terms of his design.
Yeah,
So
it just talking to Lars about the design process is like I feel fortunate to be able to get some insight into his thought process, and it's just a really it's very perfectionist.
yeah.
It's like wants it all to work like test equipment. So
Okay, let's talk about now. You have another module, the
I
portal,
have
right?
yeah, Portal
Or you
is
have a couple
here.
more.
I have two more modules. Actually, I have three. I have one that's a prototype, and then I have Portal up here, which we would need. The other two, we would need to move the camera for. So I
Okay,
have
fine.
Anna and Portal with me. Um, but Portal is certainly the most exciting of the bunch. That's my most recent release, and it is the nastiest. Let's see. So
That's portal, right?
yes, Portal. Right mirror. Um, if I plug some stuff in, Portal is a wave wrapper, which is similar to a wave folder in that it generates harmonics based on of the input, but instead of instead of. I'll just play it for you.
Yeah.
So you can hear the sort of harmonic generation. Let me play you the clean signal real fast.
Yeah.
This is what's going into it. This is what's coming out of it. So you can hear making things real gritty. It's adding harmonics. You can hear the sort of harmonic overtone series coming out of this. There's some extra controls for tracking, which affects essentially how well the effect works. And then there is feedback, which makes things extra nasty. And bias is basically a DC mix on the input. You can push things into the rails, which is a nice way to get some clipping. Or you can add in a second signals, like if I was to plug in an LFO into bias, you get some interesting sort of cross modulation. And the nice thing about Portal is that it generates so many harmonics that you can just get obnoxious squeaks out of the most bassy of sounds. So even if I was to plug this envelope, you can hear we're getting squeaks out of that. In fact, I'll do it from the LFO just so we can see what's going on. So right now, this LFO is going into Portal, and it's wrapping it so many times that we're actually able to hear it. You hear that?
That's an LFO going into the audio input.
Yes,
On Portal.
Exactly.
And it's being crunched up and wrapped and folded on itself. Not folded, but wrapped on
around.
itself.
Yeah.
That it's getting into the audio range.
Right. Essentially, a harmonic is going to generate. It's going to generate frequencies that are related to the input in such a way that you get higher and higher overtones, right? And this is giving you like, I don't know, like a harmonic multiplication of like 50 times or something like that. And then if you do some feedback, it gets even higher. And you can see this LFO is just getting turned into like absolute filth.
And that long cycle that we can sense across the rising and falling sort of the LFO, we can hear that.
Yes.
That like longer than a second cycle, right?
Yeah,
But
slow it down.
there's so much distortion that it's giving us an audio harmonic results.
Yes.
Really wild stuff. And that's dry, so imagine that there's a little bit of color, a
Yeah,
little bit of
absolutely. I have a filter here that I actually use with Portal quite a bit. Let me plug the audio back in, and we can get a better sense of it.
It even sounds great when it's being patched.
Oh, you don't know? Check this out. So I have just an unplugged cable, and Portal has so much amplification that it'll just like sense when I'm touching it, and then
Wow.
I'll just like.
Oh, that's awesome.
True circuit then.
Yeah. I love this kind of stuff.
What a fun way to play.
Is that annoying enough for you at home? All right.
Amazing.
So I'll plug it back in the oscillator, I guess. And so this is our oscillator, right? Yeah. It's all analog. So it's giving you a little just a little bit of saturation. Actually, this is the like completely insane output. There are these other two outputs. This one is round, which is much subtler, but it gives you an effect similar to bit crushing. So you can kind of hear some, I don't know, like a little bit of grit coming out of it. And then this is the weirdest one. It's called spike. And it basically gives you teeny tiny spikes whenever there's a new rap happening. It's very quiet, but it gives some really nice crackle to it. And what I like to do with this is to plug it into Three Sisters For those of you that don't know Three Sisters, it has two modes, but the mode that I use it in the most is as a variable width bandpass filter. And you can plug, for example, you can plug wrap into the bandpass input, right? And so you're getting this nasty wrapping, but you're able to tighten up the bandpass or widen it out so you're able to hear more or less of the wrap. And like you were saying, a little bit of color, right? So it's almost like a parametric EQ at this point. But the cool thing is that you can still use the other inputs for the low pass and high pass filter. So I'll plug around into the low pass to restore some of the bassier frequencies, because a wave wrapper, wave folder is going to get rid of your bass frequencies right away, because you're just getting all of these overtones. The bass just disappears. So you can hear. I'm actually going to maybe plug in something a little buzzier. All right, so that's basically like a sawtooth coming from Tides. Gives you a nice little squeal. And then this is a low pass on the round with just a little bit of the wrap. Now I can expand the bandpass filter and get more of the wrap signal in. It gives me a really nice way to interact with the mix of the three outputs, especially if I plug spike, which just gives you a little crackle into the high pass. You can hear we're basically crossfading between these three outputs with something that feels like a parametric EQ.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Especially with a little resonance. Get some really cool tones out of it. Like that kind of stuff. Get your Prodigy kind of whistle synth didgeridoo thumb.
So it's in a sense, it's a distortion, right? It takes an input from an oscillator, from some sort of tone generator, maybe not even an oscillator, maybe even like some sort of cloud generator or an LFO or any
Right.
signal almost,
Yeah.
and distorts it to the point that harmonics are generated sometimes, on otherwise inaudible signals.
Yes.
And then we have essentially an audible signal coming through that. So in that sense, it's doing more than maybe most distortions will do.
Sure. Yeah. It's flexible in a way that a lot of distortions aren't. I use it on control voltages and stuff like that to just sort of mangle what they're doing. And I'm fond of saying that it takes anything that goes into it and makes it sound like industrial. So it definitely has that sort of feel, especially on the wrap output, but it's capable of doing some much subtler and more interesting stuff. Like, for example, I have this 303 module here, and I've been experimenting a lot with not using it to distort the 303, but I'll take the VCO output, plug it into Portal, and then I'll take the wrap output from Portal and plug it into the VCF control voltage, and then you're getting a sort of wave wrapping sound while not actually sending it through a wave wrapper. So it gives you some really cool, kind of like vocally throaty kind of things. Yeah, that
Very
kind
awesome.
of thing.
And can that work at video rates as well?
I have had some success using it for video, but it is generally it's noisy and unstable. It's designed as a distortion, and distortion is usually something that you want to avoid with video. So I would not suggest it for. It is not designed with video in mind.
Right on.
Yeah.
And what's your third module that you've got going on?
Yeah. So down here we have Anna, and Anna is maybe a it's not quite as sexy as Portal is, but I use it in just about every patch I have. Anna is an analog voltage processor, and some of you might be familiar with other modules that do a similar thing. Basically, if you have the minimum of two signals or the maximum of two signals, you're able to do some somewhat advanced modulation and logic operations where, let's say, I think you've done videos on Logic before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for those of you familiar with Logic, if you plug two gates into this and you take the minimum of the two gates then you have essentially an AND gate because the minimum for the minimum of two signals to be positive, both inputs have to be positive. And then if you take the max output, you have an OR gate because for the output to be positive, either input can be positive. I sort of extrapolated that idea out to make an XOR, which ends up behaving a lot like a through zero VCA, but with the sort of weird clipping behavior that a min and max normally have. I also have a difference rectifier, which is sort of like a unipolar XOR, and it gives you some really nice. It's a really nice way to make control voltages that are always positive, which is super useful if you're opening a filter where you only need to send it in one direction or something like that. I also have a smooth step sample and hold, similar to the woggle bug, where sometimes you get sample and hold behavior and sometimes you are passing your input, as well as the box output, which is a bipolar comparator. Basically, a normal comparator will give you either a zero or a positive voltage, or a negative voltage and a positive voltage. This one gives you negative, zero, and positive, depending on your outputs. And there's a variety of ways to patch into this. So if I was going to patch, let's see if this cable's long enough. Patch into, I'm gonna grab a longer one. If I was going to patch into the VCA, and I have a tone going into channel 1, and this LFO going into channel 2. I think that's what I have. Oh, no, this is unplugged. Whoops. Alright, so we have a normal old VCA. It gives you some clipping when it's going through 0. Minimum is going to give you some weird clipping stuff. Maximum is going to give you some weird clipping stuff. Magnitude is really nice because it'll give you an output no matter what. And so you can get this cool kind of like octave doubling wave animation kind of effect, especially if I do it on a triangle wave. And maybe like clip it a little less. You're getting almost like a pulse width modulation kind of thing, but on a triangle. Step is probably not going to be super interesting right now. If I ran in some audio, probably be better. Let's see.
So we're taking two signals, we're comparing those signals in different ways.
Yeah.
And then the result of that comparison comes out, are we looking for those signals added together? Or rather, are we looking for whichever one is higher, or whichever one is lower, or these other things, and other combinations, other ways to compare these two signals to each other, and we get an odd result.
It's just
result,
different, 6 different sort of algorithms for combining signals, and you can do all of these with a single signal, where you're just like, I want a VCA, I want a sample and hold, I want a rectifier, I want a comparator. You can use it as just one of those things, or you can patch 2 things into it and just take the 6 outputs and plug it into different stuff in your system. And it's a really nice way to have a non-linear sort of interaction with your system. So you're turning a knob and you're like, I don't necessarily know what this knob is going to do, but I like it when it's sort of in this territory, right? And it's different than being like, I'm going to change the filter cutoff because this is the part where you change the filter cutoff. It's just a different sort of setup. And I guess I wanted to show the box output too, because that's the one that people are really like, get this nasty square wave kind of thing. And this weird like bipolar pulse width modulation kind of stuff. Yeah, Anna is a utility module, and so it's not quite as exciting as a big extravagant distortion, but I use it all the time.
But it can kind of be that, and it can kind of be a number of other
it
tone
does,
altering things.
It does the tone stuff. It works well with CV. I use it a lot in patches where I have nothing plugged into Anna, but I'm just like using the voltage control outputs, because when nothing's plugged in, this is an offset.
Oh,
so
nice.
for example, here I'm plugged into the input, and this first knob will act as an attenuator.
Mm.
If I plug into here, it acts as an offset. So you actually have a pretty wide variety of ways that you're able to interact with your patch. In fact, I kind of want to try, if it's all right with you to patch for a little bit,
Sure.
I kind of want to try just plugging it into this 303 and seeing what we can get out of it.
And we could use something like this with gates, with creating effectively gate patterns by
Yes.
comparing different gates together.
Absolutely.
Right?
And you can get some sort of voltage control over it too by patching into the different inputs and using them for different sections. I personally, what I like about Anna is it basically gives you in what you take out of it, or it gives you out what you put into it. So if you put gates in, you're going to get gates at all of your outputs.
Mhm.
If you put audio in, you're going to get audio at all of your outputs. If you plug in gates and audio, you're going to get something that's halfway between gates and audio. And so you can get some really interesting stuff out of that.
And you could even plug all of those outputs into tree, right? And
Yes.
like switch between them, send the result of whichever one you're selecting to portal, distort the whole thing again.
Yes.
So we got a complementary collection of modules.
I have not exhausted the number of ways that you are able to use Anna or come even close. That is certainly the case. All right. So here I have a patch with the M303, and it's a little quiet, but you can see here I have nothing patched into Anna, and basically when I turn the knobs, it'll sort of decide to send a gate or a note or voltage to the VCF or to the VCO. You might want to turn it up a little bit because this module is very quiet. And you can see here, I'm turning these two knobs, but I'm controlling almost everything about this module, right? I especially like with the sample and hold, it just sort of randomly decides when to hold a note. And so I never really know exactly what's going to happen with it. And just with these two knobs, I'm controlling basically all of the parameters of this synthesizer.
That's really wild.
Yeah. So
And
of
it's
course,
all in terms of modulating the tone of that 303.
yeah,
It's all coming from just modulating this one.
it's all coming from modulating. All of these outputs are plugged into different inputs on the 303, and so they're all doing
Oh,
something.
okay, gotcha.
They're all controlling different aspects of it. In fact, what you can do from here, as I search for the right size of cable, I'm going to plug just into one more into the accent so that we get a little bit more going on. And then I can just plug an LFO. I can plug an LFO into Anna because I know I'm in some territory that I like, right? And it will start to do its thing. If I plug another LFO into the second input, I'll probably get something a little bit more.
And that way it'll be comparing those two input signals. and
Exactly.
using the resulting CV to modulate the 303.
Exactly. Let's see. I think I'm going to use this as an offset. The pitch is getting really low. It's not the most beautiful patch I've ever made, but it shows what Anna is useful for, which is to take two things, plug it into a whole bunch of different places, and then be like, I have no idea what happens when I turn this knob, but it's going to take me somewhere. There you have it.
It sounds like a distressed 303 right now.
Yeah, distressed. Help me, please. I guess I could plug. I'm going to try one more thing. I'm going to plug a gate into this and see if we can get some rhythm out of it.
Oh, yeah. Now it sounds excited.
Yeah. Excited 303. Yeah, getting some weird stuff out of there.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Now we're getting good. I love
certainly
that.
giving me some nice bubbles.
Got your Star Wars droid sounds for years here.
I wonder what would happen if I plugged the envelope back into here. So I would do something like this. Plug the envelope into here. And then it's kind of doing some of the feedback stuff that we were talking about earlier. Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
Now it's got a mind of its own now. Or maybe slow down this gate. Yeah. It's pretty fun.
I love that.
Well,
Still very dry, but that's this is a simple patch right now.
simple patch.
Not so simple, but
Simple patch for a simple man.
simple path from the output to the mixer anyway. Wow. Well, this has been extremely enlightening. And so all of these modules are currently available.
Yes, except for the tree expander. So tree is available, portal is available, Ana is available. Yeah, and leaves is probably the next thing coming out.
That's the expander for
tree.
Tree.
Yeah, I also have another expander coming out for tree, but it's sort of more on the horizon, mostly because I just want to use leaves, and so I'm focusing on that primarily. Yeah, I have one more prototype that I'd be happy to show if we
Sure.
have time for it.
Sure. Let's see it. Is it
Yeah,
this one down
it's
at
this
the
one
bottom?
down here,
All
yeah.
right, let's do one of these moves.
So it's going to require a little patching, but basically this module is called IDUM, and it is designed to make IDM, even if you're not that intelligent.
IDUM.
IDUM,
I like that.
exactly. So what we've got is
IDM, of course, is
intelligent dance music, so to speak.
typified by what kind of artists?
Aphex Twin and Warp are sort of like the quintessential, like Warp Records
Records.
artists, like Square Pusher, Plaid, stuff like that. They're sort of like the well-known IDM crowd. Obviously, there are a lot more folks out there. I would say locally, probably SFE Acid and Basic are the two that come to mind.
We used to have a very healthy IDM scene in LA.
Yeah, it
and,
seems to
dubstep
still be.
came along.
Oh
and
yeah,
there it went.
that stupid dubstep, the fart polka. Yeah, well, there's definitely still some of the real heads out here listening to IDM,
Absolutely.
and one of the things that makes IDM so great is the fact that it doesn't just repeat itself over and over again. So if I was to, let's say, plug in a drum module, and then IDUM will take 4 gate sequences and a clock input, and let's see.
Oh, I gotta turn the volumes up.
No. I turned my own volume off. Don't worry about it. I think I just need to start from a different sequence because I plugged some stuff in on this sequence. So if I do something like, and then I got to plug the drums in, obviously. So
Plug those drums.
the drums. And then we listen to Yank. This guy. Let's see what we've got going on. All right. Very kind of standard, repetitive 16-step sequence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what IDUM does is you have a selection of 8 different sort of like algorithms that will manipulate your triggers, and it will apply those algorithms randomly. with a set probability. So like if I was to, let's say, increase the probability of this algorithm, it's going to randomly skip notes or extend notes, which isn't really, super obvious in a drum pattern,
Sure.
but it's starting to sort of add notes in, right? There is, for example, another algorithm which gets kind of nuts, which will do ratchets. In fact, I'm going to slow down the clock so that the ratchets have like absolute going real fast. Let's try that.
It sounds extreme on a clap, but on a hi-hat it might be a little bit less, in your face.
All right, there we go. So adding just a little bit in, so to the right it's adding in ratchets, and to the left it's adding in bursts. So sort of like whenever the input is on, it'll ratchet, whereas here it's just sticking it on top of everything like a blast beat kind of thing. That's all based on the length of the clock. There's also one that's based on the speed of the inputs, so give you sort of more organic clock multiplication and division. This one is a bouncing ball. We have both an expanding bouncing ball, and you can control the speed of the bouncing ball, as well as a contracting bouncing ball. Obviously, you can modulate all of this as well as modulating the actual algorithm. Some other algorithms up here. I haven't completely decided what they're all going to do, but they all do fun IDM stuff. And if you start to modulate some of these things, like if we were to...
Hey, Div Kid. What's up, Div Kid?
Hey, buddy. Modulate the mode. I can't actually see what I'm plugging into here. Yeah, this should modulate the mode. So now, turning up the probability. You can see this normal 16-step sequence is actually giving us a fair amount of variety that it didn't have before. Let's see, this should be the parameter. Probably going to get really nuts now. But yeah, and giving you some IDM. And also the clock output is plugged into tree actually, so we're getting a voltage sequence out of it, and it's sort of manipulating the clocks going through it. So if I was to plug that into flats, let's say, or let's do rings actually, because rings will trigger whenever we do another thingamabob. Just real quick. Wait. So you can see here that rings is also being manipulated from IDM. And we really quickly got some IDM
I was
sounding
gonna
kind of stuff.
say,
Oh,
that
hey.
was fast.
Well, look at that. I'm using like 4 modules and getting IDM out of it.
Put that shit on tape.
Yeah,
Put it out.
right.
So I can't help but think that this module needs a go dumb feature
Yeah.
and do like switches right to some hypey Mr. Fab style
Yeah.
San Francisco
man.
beats.
Maybe I should just make an alternate version of it that it's the go dumb module.
The go dumb, yeah.
Yeah.
It's all Bay Area beat structures.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to. I can't claim to be an artist on Bay Area rap or an expert on Bay Area rap, so I would probably have to collaborate with someone on that. If one of you knows a lot about Bay Area rap, get in touch with me.
Anyone who knows how to go dumb.
Yeah, and if you know how to go dumb and get hyphy, get in touch with me, please. We want to make your module.
You can ghost ride your whip.
I do like the idea of a go dumb button.
This is great. This module I think is going to be explosively popular.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to get it out there as quickly as possible.
I can understand. I think
Yeah.
this is going to be a hit. Really exciting
Now
results.
check
for
this
that.
out, right? Now if I turn the probability down, just a normal 16-step sequence, might be adding one or two things in here or there just because it's a little buggy still, but right, like no variations at all. 50% variation. 100% variation. It's practically a completely
great.
different thing.
Yeah, this one's going to be a favorite. Aphex
Yeah.
Twin is going to be calling you, wanting one of these.
Let's hope so. If you're Aphex Twin in the chat right now, get in touch with me.
Yeah, give us all a shout out.
Yeah.
Reach out to all of us.
Shout out to Aphex Twin.
yeah.
Thank you for all you do.
Thank you for inspiring us all. Well, man, that was really incredible. Thank you for showing us these devices. I cannot say how excited I am about some of these things.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for having me on.
all
Brought to you
these
by
things.
Cats. Go see Cats in theaters now.
Thank you, Andrew Lloyd Webber, as
Yes.
well. Aphex Twin, gets all his due. Let's give it up for Andrew Lloyd Webber for changing all of our lives.
Indeed.
Well, Eli, thank you
Yeah, thank
so
you.
much for coming in here. This was extremely informative and it's really exciting to see what you're doing, how you're taking this
Thank you.
this
Yeah, thanks for having
outside.
me. It's good to be back in the studio, hang out with you guys.
Yeah, man,
I guess
you were in
now's
here
a
a couple
good
years
time.
ago.
If you want, I've got Portal T-shirts.
Portal
If you
T-shirts.
buy a Portal soon, throw in a free T-shirt. Just buy it from buy my stuff.
I mean, come on, go get that thing. This thing is amazing. So, really.
If you want item to
wild
come
stuff.
out soon, you got to buy Portals.
Yeah, come on. These things are going to be complimentary for you. I can practically
Yeah.
guarantee. So, but yeah, I think you've given us all a lot of things to think about.
Some
here.
brain juice.
Yeah, it's really, it's outside the box design. It's not your let's make a Moog style voice of modules, and that is what makes what we do so interesting and exciting. So,
Well, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
well, thanks for doing it because it takes a special mind. So, if you guys have,
People have called me special.
I mean that in a good way.
know.
So, if you guys want to check out Eli's stuff, where can they go? We have your links in the description of the video, but where you tell us.
Yeah, mysticcircuits.com, Instagram /Mystic Circuits. I also have a Facebook, but I just don't post on there that often. So Instagram and the website are the best places to follow me. And I have my YouTube channel. I'm going to be, now that things have kind of settled down work-wise, I'm going to be doing more demo videos of some of the older modules, as well as, the YouTube is just a good way to find out when stuff has been released from me.
So go and check out Mystic Circuits YouTube channel. We'll put a link in the description for that as well. You have some really cool videos, really fun, light stuff that you do. So I really love that.
Silly videos.
Yeah, absolutely. So go show Eli some love, and thank you guys all so much for checking into this video.
Thanks a lot,
and for
y'all.
sticking around for it all. This one we got really deep, and I can't thank you enough for that. So
Yeah, thank you.
be your own safety monitor.
This is safety first, y'all.
All right, thanks
You
everybody.
can't even read it.
You're not wearing your safety
You have it the wrong way.
goggles.
All right, thanks everybody. You guys take